Hello and welcome to Spread Book Joy. Today I've got a reading ramble. If you're new to the channel, I'm Jack, and if you're not new, welcome back to Spread Book Joy. And today is one of my reading rambles where I just catch you up on what I've been reading. If you're new to the channel, I don't really do wrap-ups or TBRs or anything like that because I don't like to put restrictions or boundaries on my reading. So every now and again I'll just do a ramble, which is what I've been reading, what I'm planning on reading, my thoughts on reading, anything I want to talk about. So since I last spoke to you, which was over a month ago, I've done quite a bit. Whilst I have not had time for social media and booktube, I have had time to read. I've prioritised reading. So my very short amount of free time in the day over the month of July as an educator, the end of the academic year, is always super busy. I've not been prioritising social media, I've been prioritising actual reading. So I read more in July than I've read most of the year in terms of number of books. They were all great books as well. I don't think I read anything that I didn't really enjoy. I did DNF a book, which was The Kings of the Wyld by Eames. I don't think it's the book's fault. I think it's my fault, because it was a type of book which had a lot of characters, a lot going on, and I kept putting it down and not picking it up. It's the sort of book that you need to read in a few sittings to really enjoy it. And every time I picked it up, I was like, oh, I don't know what's going on. So I've DNF'd for now. DNFY, did not finish yet. But I finished North and South, which I put a review up of. I finished Howard's End. Howard's End I read with the amazing Marilyn Maya Mendoza and Berna from Berna's Bookish Adventures. We buddy read this. Took us most of the month of July mainly because I was so busy. I was really slow picking up on messages and talking about the book, but the level of depth that those two wonderful, really intelligent women went into over this book astounded me and really enhanced my whole experience reading Forster for the first time. I'd wanted to read EM Forster for some time now, and I'd been recommended Howard's End by Claudia as his best book, so I thought I'll start with the best and what's reputed to be his best book. So I'm definitely going to read more Forster in my life. I should do a more in-depth overview of Howard's End, but I absolutely adored it. It was written in 1910, and a lot of the themes in the book just seemed so modern and fresh. There was a lot of themes of class, gender equality. There was a lot of talk about the changing landscape in response to modernisation. So the changing landscape of London as a Londoner, the arguments and the comments and the things that Forster was talking about in the book actually struck home to me as someone living in London in 2022, are the same sort of things that he's seeing happening in terms of the changes to London as an area. I'm still seeing happening. So it just shows you how continual these changes and modern and things are. I think every generation thinks so much change has happened, but it's just an ongoing process if you live somewhere with a lot of people and a lot of infrastructure and a lot of change. But he talked about the changing landscape of England because of the introduction of the motor car, and that was fascinating. And the sort of downsides of that and the pollution aspects of that he talked about. I just found it really fascinating. I loved the author's voice comes across so strongly in the novel. He gives you his views and opinions on things quite directly and talks to the reader. And sometimes I don't really like that. Sometimes I can feel like I'm being lectured at by an author, but with Forster I didn't, and I just really enjoyed hearing his voice and thoughts and opinions on the page, and the depth of discussion that we got into over some of the lines and some of the things he was saying, just fantastic. I believe that Berna and Marilyn have done reviews of Howard's End, which are really worth watching if they have. I'm going to hopefully put one up. Can't promise. The way things are, I feel like with me, if I don't get a review out quite soon after reading the book, it's not going to happen because my thoughts just all over the place and I didn't have time to do it. But it's wonderful, and I think if I do another reading of another Forster book, I'll have to do something a bit more in depth about it because lots to unpick and just fantastic, definite, amazing book, really good. I'm looking forward to watching the adaptation actually, because that's over on Netflix. So I read Howard's End with Marilyn Meyer and Berner. I've finished Alice Austen Lived Here by Alex Gino. I've got that over here because it's a library book. Alice Austen Lived Here by Alex Gino. It's a middle grade book about two non-binary teenagers living in Staten Island in New York, and they're set a task by their history teacher to do a presentation about a historical figure from Staten Island, and there's a competition that a statue is going to be put up to this person, this figure. So they discover an artist called Alice Austen, who's a photographer, who was a lesbian who lived in Staten Island at the turn of the century in sort of the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, not the recent turn of the century. They discover her pictures and discover all about her. And Alice Austen was a real artist, and Alex Gino discovered all about Alice Austen's life and the building that she lived in and everything else. And it always inspired Alex Gino to write this book basically, and to talk about the fact that actually LGBTQIA plus people have always been here. This is not a new phenomenon, and actually they're part of our history. They have a history, and I just thought it was really good at bringing that to light, to show, because the main characters in the book, they're two non-binary characters, teenagers, and they have older sort of queer friends in the book who are being mentors to them, really. It's interesting, it's quite an eye-opener. What I didn't enjoy so much about the book, didn't work for me too much, was unlike it, I mean, it is a middle grade book, so I've got to, you know, take that with a pinch of salt, but unlike something where you hear an author's voice coming through and they're giving you lessons about something or giving you their opinion on something, I kind of felt that the main character, who is Sam, quite often Sam and Sam's mentors would talk like a textbook when they're giving a lesson, like they're telling us sort of some information about or queer culture, and it kind of felt a bit lectury. It didn't feel natural, so I felt it could have been done in a much more natural way. I think that is a talent when authors can do that, but other than that, I thought it was a good book. I thought it was really informative and just heartwarming. Actually, it was quite a heartwarming book. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading more about Alex Gino. I have still got to read Melissa, which I've got out of the library and still haven't read, but I will get to it at some point. I continued my Sookie Stackhouse journey, and I went on and read From Dead to Worse, and then I read the August read Dead and Gone. So I read 2 months worth of Sookie Stackhouse books. I'm keeping along with I'm like trying to keep up with the Out of the Coffin read along, hosted by Ange's Book Chatter, and Amy from BookTube with Amy, and we're reading the Sookie Stackhouse Southern Vampire Mysteries by Charlaine Harris. 13 books in the series, and it was 1 book a month apart from July or June, where it's supposed to be 2 books that we read. I just keep devouring these books. I'm speeding ahead, and I can't really talk about them now because we're like 9 or 10 books into the series. So other than to say, if you've never read it and you like urban fantasy, what are you doing? Go and read those books immediately. So I've talked about my Jane Austen July reading in a separate video. So I read Kindred, Persuasion, Lady Susan, which I keep wanting to call Lazy Susan, but I've talked about that in another video, and I'll link that in the description box below. So I wrapped up all of my Jane Austen July reading in a separate video. So you're lucky, because otherwise this could go on for some time. I also finished Away with the Penguins by Hazel Pryor, which I was buddy reading with a friend of mine. Lovely contemporary feel-good book with an older protagonist. I just loved it. I love a curmudgeonly older protagonist, and it was just lovely, lovely book. I'm looking forward to reading the follow-up, Call of the Penguins. Yeah, just a nice book, feel-good book. Things that I finished recently, really, one book that has surprised me so much this month is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I watched AJ Dunn's, I can't remember which video it was I watched of theirs, but I watched a video of AJ Dunn's where they recommended The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and I kept thinking, oh, I've never read that and I really would like to. Went onto my library app, they had it, I downloaded it and I read it within 24 hours. What an amazing book. Very, very surprising. So, you know, if you're talking about books that have surprised me this year, that really surprised me. And I don't know why, because it's so highly regarded. But I remember having a discussion with someone around YA books, and I said, well, there are YA books and then there are just good books that are YA. And The Perks of Being a Wallflower is one of those. It is a fantastic coming of age story, heartbreaking, really kind of quite nostalgic for me because it's set in the 90s, which is when I was a teenager. So I just find, the early 90s, I was a teenager. And yeah, I just found the whole book, because it's written as a series of letters, and that's always a great format, isn't it? Epistolary novels always appeal to me. It's really gorgeous book about friendship, about finding yourself, about learning about yourself, about trauma, about all sorts of things. But I read it and listened to it all on BorrowBox, and fantastic. I was just swept along in it, and I just fell in love with the character, and I was just so taken in by the story. And I did watch the film years ago, but it didn't have the same impact on me, and now I'm really desperate to see it, but it's not on any streaming services at the moment. But yes, loved it, absolutely loved it. Thank you, AJ. I also read Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Basterica. Really short, punchy, powerful, very, very disturbing dystopian novel, all about a world where animals have become so diseased that people have begun, cannibalism has been legalised, and they've been genetically growing and modifying humans for slaughter. So we follow the story of one of the people who works in a production plant for human meat. Really graphic, very, very disturbing, and because content warnings galore for this. I found it extremely thought-provoking, and there's a lot that goes on in the book that just makes you go whoa, and think about the meat industry in general, and the treatment of livestock in general, because I'm pretty sure that everything that's gone on in this book that happens to these farmed humans happens to animals around the world. So yeah, a lot to think about there. I'd recommend it if you like that kind of thing. It is well worth reading. And finally, another surprising read for me. It came up on BorrowBox, so I borrowed it, and I've been wanting to read it for a while. And it's a YA book. It's a collection of books by Anthony McGowan. It's a series called The Truth of Things series, and the fourth book in the series, Lark, came out in 2020, and it won the Carnegie Medal. And it was really unusual because the publisher, Barrington Stoke, they specifically produce books for older children who have specific learning needs such as dyslexia, and therefore need books written a certain level to be accessible, but they provide books that the content is not for younger children. So I think Barrington Stoke do an amazing job of seeking out really good quality stories and authors. So Anthony McGowan was commissioned by Barrington Stoke to write the story, and he had to be quite concise with his language and think about the choice of words, because the story is written for people who struggle with decoding. He has done a marvellous job. And Lark, the fourth book in the series, had won the Carnegie Medal. Unusual for a book from a specialist publisher. So I've wanted to read it for some years, and the audiobook, Lark and the Truth of Things, which is the 4 books in a series on audio, performed by Dario Coates. Marvellous, absolutely marvellous. I downloaded it, I started listening to it one day, and before you know it, 3 or 4 hours had gone past while I was doing housework, and I hadn't even noticed. It's the story of 2 brothers growing up in Yorkshire, in a small rural village in Yorkshire. It's very socially disadvantaged. They live with their father, who's a single parent at the start of the story, and the brothers are Nicky and Kenny, and Nicky narrates the stories. Kenny is his older brother, but his older brother is born with learning difficulties. I think he was starved of oxygen when he was being born, and so he had some brain damage and he has some learning needs, and their relationship is just it's so heartwarming. And each of the books is named after an animal. So the first book, Brock, which is an old-fashioned name for a badger. Then there's Rook, Pike and Lark, and there's a nature theme in each of the books, and animals feature prominently in quite a few of the books. And they're YA books. Initially, when I read the first 2, I thought actually the first 2 could be suitable for children of middle grade age, but there's some mild swearing in those. But then in the third book, there's quite a lot of swearing, and not mild either. So actually, I think, the whole book's the collection really suitable for children aged sort of 15 and up. But the stories are just wonderful, and their relationship to each other is very touching, and lots of things that plenty of children and families in the UK at the moment will recognise in terms of the hardships they're going through. There are themes that, you know, lots of children will connect to anyway, around bullying and school and first relationships and relationships with parents and, you know, growing up. And it just loved that series, absolutely loved it. So I'm definitely going to get myself a copy to keep for myself at some point in the future, because it was just wonderful. So what am I reading at the moment? Well, it is August, and that means Garb August, right? So Garb August is the trashy read along. It's being hosted by millions of people, but it was the brainchild of Ollie over at Criminolly, who reads horror, pulp, whatever, that kind of thing. I can never remember his tagline, but yeah. So Garb August, I am going to be taking part. I'm going to be buddy reading VC Andrews' Flowers in the Attic, the trash classic from the 80s, I believe it's the 80s, which I never read. I'm buddy reading that with Gemma from Gemma Books and Alice at Alice in the Giant Bookshelf. We're starting that next week. I'm also going to try and read, and this is the thing, the big debate about what is trash. I've got some thoughts on this, not just about what is trash, but in my mid-year freakout book, we was asked what was our best books, and I was like, what does that mean, best? So like all this language around books and what we think of them and how subjective it all is. So I've got some thoughts on it, which I might ramble about in another video. But I was also lent this by someone very close to me. It's Jeffrey Archer. So I don't know, some people might not consider Jeffrey Archer trash, but I'm going to consider it for Garb August. It's supposed to be very, very good though, this Cain and Abel it's called. And also in August, I am buddy reading still with Gemma as well, just because we were waiting for it to come out in her library, and her library released it, but it's The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles. Never read any Amor Towles, and The Lincoln Highway was gifted to me by my wonderful friend Sally from Instagram. Her account, Salbo Reads, is marvellous, and you should go and follow her. But it is a road trip, coming of age story, two brothers and two other friends who so the older brother was released at the start of the book from a young offenders institute, and two young men from the institute have hitched a ride in the back of the warden's car with him, and they plan on travelling across America for various reasons. We've got about 200 pages in, and both Gemma and I are loving it. Actually, it's a great story. I'm also going to be buddy reading, there's lots of buddy reads this month, starting the series. It's a reread for me, but Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. One of my favourite fantasy series of all time now. I only read it for the first time about 4 or 5 years ago, and this is absolutely everything you want in a fantasy series. If you've never read any Robin Hobb, lots of people say read the Farseer trilogy. No. Read the Live Ship Traders trilogy. Same world, but you don't need to have read other trilogies or other of her books to get into this. But the Ship of Magic, the Live Ship Traders, I won't go into exactly what it's about, but there's political intrigue, there's adventure, there's a huge cast of amazing characters. The characterization is fantastic. Every character has some grey area, like there's no cut and dried good bad people. It's not grimdark, but there are some characters you'd be forgiven for thinking could appear in a grimdark fantasy. But I'm so looking forward to this. I'm going to be buddy reading this with Paula from Old Bookish Woman on Instagram. She is wonderful. So that's my current reading plans. I'm also carrying on with War and Peace. Just to update you, I am here with War and Peace, and I aim to finish it within the next 2 weeks, by the end of August anyway. I'm reading an amazing middle grade book. This book here, Once Upon a Fever. It was only published in July. I got sent it because I review books for a website called Just Imagine, and I've been sent this to review. Once Upon a Fever by Angharad Walker. It's published by Chicken House Books, who are phenomenal. If you ever see a middle grade book and it's published by Chicken House, I can guarantee you it's going to be good. So this is the story. It's like an alternative London setting. It's been given comparisons to his Dark Materials, much where you got an alternative Oxford setting, and it's a world where there are various diseases brought on by emotions, and the two main characters are two sisters living in a hospital in London. Their father is a methic, which is their version of a doctor, and their mother is a patient there. So yeah, really good so far, very atmospheric, and I will do a review of it for the channel when I finish. I also did a big book haul, but I'm going to do a separate video for that because it was my birthday, and I got lots and lots of lovely books for it, but I will do a separate video for that because this is already super long. So what have you been up to? Have you been reading any good books? Have you got any thoughts on Trash and Garb August? And I'm pretty sure I've forgotten some of the things I'm planning on reading. Oh, I'm also planning on buddy reading Antigone, the play, which is one of the Theban plays, Sophocles' Theban plays, with a lovely friend Flick Reads over on Instagram. It's another thing I've got planned. So what are your plans? Are you reading anything Garb August? Are you reading anything interesting that you think, oh, that Jack might like that? Pop it in the comments below. And if you've never been here before, and you think that's a bit rambling, but I like it, maybe subscribe, and hopefully I will see you again here soon. Bye.